Welcome to Haunted Hospitality, Southern Stories told by Spooky Gingers. I'm Robin.
And I'm Zoe.
And I have a story for you today, but first, Zoe, how's life?
Well, Robin, I spent yesterday volunteering at the Carolina Martial Arts Open. So, you know, the dojo I go to, my sensei, his sensei runs the biggest karate dojo in our area. And so he runs this martial arts open. It's a competition thing like that. And I was going to compete in it, but I had 2 allergic reactions to something I don't know this week. So that's great. I had like mystery foods where I didn't know the ingredients, and I had to I went into my throat was swelling up kind of allergic reaction. And I'm like,
Zoe,
cool, I don't know what caused that. And so I was like, I'm not going to compete because, what if, you know?
Yeah.
And also, the intro fee I couldn't excuse just because we're saving up for the wedding. But I volunteered yesterday because I was like, well, I might as well do a part of it. It was a lot of fun. I was there at 8 a.m. and I was supposed to be there until, pretty much late at night, but then my sensei came over when I was done with my part, and he was like, hey, have you been assigned anything else? And I was like, no, and he's like, run. So
thanks, Gene.
Yeah. So I got out of there, and so I was able to relax a little bit with Kari, but that was pretty much my whole day yesterday. I was a scorekeeper for the ring, so it was fun.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. How about you? How's your life?
I'm spooked.
Oh,
Zoe.
How are you spooked?
I have gotten a lot better about reading about terrifying things at night for this podcast. But last night, I came across something that I simply could not continue with until this morning.
Wow.
So, the spook is fresh, but at least it didn't torment me in the nighttime.
Okay. Is that what the story is for today?
It's involved in it.
Okay.
It's foreshadowing, Zoe. I'm doing foreshadowing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you for understanding. You have something for us today?
Yes, I do. I have something superstitious for us to do. So, Robin, you know, I have a coworker who's in the Philippines, and you don't know this next part. That was the extent to what you know.
That is the extent to what I know.
So she and her fiance are actually moving into a new house together. And her fiance is also my coworker, so I know them well. And at work, we started doing this Friday morning meeting where one of us gives a presentation about something. And of course, I did mine on cryptids. So this was my coworker's a couple weeks ago. And she's given me permission to share this. But these are Filipino superstitions with moving into a new house. So I wanted to share a couple with us, and I think I just hit the mic. I apologize. So the moving in starts with a ritual where you bring in salt, rice, and coins into the house. And it's salt, rice, it's so you can never go hungry. Coins are so you'll stay wealthy. So it's the idea of you'll bring these things in so your life will be prosperous. And so you throw the coins in the corners. You also bring in fruits so that your life will bloom. And the idea is that it will draw riches and fortune. They say that you want to live somewhere where the front door faces east because that's where the sun rises. And that will bring warmth and prosperity into your house. And if you face west, the front door, if it faces west, it'll bring financial issues, fights, and death.
So, one side of the street is, really well off, and the other part is oh, no, we they're just fights over the houses.
Yeah, so I have a couple other Filipino coworkers, and when she was sharing this, she was saying that she did this, but the others didn't know about this. They didn't do it. Okay. So it's not everybody does this. It's just kind of old culture. I think her family is a little bit more old culture. And so...
Okay, so you can have a neighborhood, the traditional subdivision.
Yes, you can.
Okay.
So she is Christian, And so they brought a priest in before they moved in, and he did what he calls a deliverance. So normally it would be a blessing if it was a brand new residence, but they're moving into somewhere where somebody has lived before, so they called it a deliverance. And the priest will scatter salt and holy water. They'll throw salt into the corners of the rooms, the corners of the lots, and onto the roof. And she was told to get rid of bad omen magnets. So she had to get rid of her Harry Potter DVDs, excuse me. She had to get rid of all her horror films and books because she is like us. She likes spooky things. So she had to get rid of all of that. And apparently when they moved in, the previous tenants left behind books on witchcraft that they had to get rid of. So they're like, okay, let's get rid of that. So then once the priest was done, she told us a couple other things about that they didn't do, but some people do. They say that you can't place a mirror anywhere because it can't be across the main door. So the idea is if you walk in a door and you can immediately see a mirror, it turns away guests and it turns away good luck.
I would be really freaked out if I entered a house and immediately saw myself.
Yeah, just a little. She said it was similar to feng shui. She also said that doors in the house can't be parallel because the flow of luck has to be kind of circular rather than like angular, if that makes sense.
Okay. She
says that if you see a bunch of black ants in a line, especially across doorways, that you should leave it because it symbolizes wealth and prosperity. I personally wouldn't like the idea of having black ants in my house, but and she said if somebody you know is moving into a house and you're giving them a gift, a housewarming gift, don't give them knives or something sharp or cutting, because it's kind of like saying, I want to cut you out of my life if you do that.
Okay, I'll take that. I'll take a note of that.
She also says that when you buy a new house, you have to make sure that you buy a new broom, because if you bring the old broom from your old house, you're bringing in your old troubles, your old worries, your old issues. So a broom is meant to get rid of those issues, and you need to retire your old broom and get a new one.
I like that.
Yeah.
Also, my brooms are like messy, so I like the excuse to not have to touch that.
Yeah. And then she shared a couple more other ones. She said she didn't know the reason for it, but a lot of older people in the area will put an octagon mirror with a circle inside outside the front door. So either above it or on the roof or on the door itself. It has something to do with like demons or luck. And she also said, I think this was just a side note, but she was saying that if you see a butterfly in the house, that's a dead relative visiting.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so those are just, I loved listening to it, so I just thought I'd share.
Thank you for sharing. I'm taking mental notes as I'm moving into a place at some point soon.
You know what? I was thinking of that. I didn't want to say it on the pod because I don't. Oh, you literally said it last episode. Never mind.
I did, yes.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not saying where I'm moving.
Right, yeah.
That's the big thing, yeah.
So I'll gather my quarters, and when I'm helping you guys move in, I'll just, like, throw quarters around.
Thanks. Guys, not the last time I moved into a place, like 3 or 4 moves ago, Zoe built a bookshelf for me, and it's right beside me right now. So thanks, Zoe.
I did.
You did.
That was fun.
I think I tried, and then I, like, absolutely gave up. And then I gave it to you to try.
Well, I love building IKEA furniture, so.
I think you said that, too, so it was like, it all fit together.
Yeah.
Literally. It's a bookshelf now.
Well, do you have a story for us, Robin?
I do, and we're going to Kentucky, because I have not been giving Kentucky its due love. Okay. So this is me rectifying that issue.
Okay. Have you never done one in Kentucky?
I actually don't think I have. I really don't think I have.
I'm sorry, Kentucky.
And, like, what if somebody, like, pulls up, like, I'm sorry, you have this one, and this one, and they're just wiped out of my mind completely. But I really don't think I have, but I am now.
Well, to be fair, we have, like, 60-something episodes, so.
Yeah, I can't keep everything in my head at once, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm going to be talking to you about the Old Talbott Tavern.
Okay, I know the name Talbot, but I don't think I know the Talbot Tavern.
All right, well, that's good. The Old Talbott Tavern was built in 1779. It was built where there was no town quite yet, but about a year later, they moved a town in there called Salem. And at that point, they were kind of still deciding, where are states? What are states? where are the lines of which they go? So at the point of building, it was at No Town, Virginia. And now it is Bardstown, Kentucky.
Got it.
Because they decided Kentucky should be there, not Virginia. All right, up to date.
Got it.
The tavern was originally built with stone, and the walls were about 2 feet thick. It had something similar, but not the same, to the Myrtles Plantation, which we covered a few episodes back. And in the Myrtles Plantation, there were 2 big parlors, one for men, one for women. But in the tavern, this wasn't exactly like a big parlor place. So, okay, what this was like when it was a place for like people to stay, rest their horses, rest for the night. It was kind of like, we've covered a few of these where it was like I'm inferring this like kind of meeting place of the town. I've seen a few places say it was like the westernmost stagecoach stop, which meant like people who were moving out west would like stop there one final time before like really kicking off onto their trip of kind of going to places that maybe towns weren't usually at, is how I'm reading that. So because like a lot of people would stay there, at this time in history in the 1770s, you wouldn't necessarily expect to stay in an individual room, you and your family. So they had one room where all the male guests stayed and one room where all the female guests stayed. So it was like a boarding room. Mm-hmm. By the way, this might be the oldest building in Kentucky.
Oh, okay.
I feel like that has a good shot at being the oldest building. That's really old.
Yeah.
There is a cemetery out back called the Pioneer Cemetery, and there's a lovely photo I have, which I'm actually not sharing with you, so don't open your email yet.
Okay.
But I just wanted you to know it has a lot of meadow vibes. It's a lot of older headstones, where it's kind of like difficult to read who they're by, and they're covered with algae, and I just need you to know it's actually really, really, really pretty.
Okay.
And also haunted, but I'll get to that in a
second.
Yay! A lot of famous people, I should add, have reportedly stayed at the tavern. This would be President Lincoln. When he was like a 5 to 7-year-old, it said that his parents were going through a legal dispute, and I'm pretty sure they stayed there. I'm pretty sure the reason they stayed there is because the courthouse was across the street from it. Andrew Jackson stayed there, president. President William Henry Harrison stayed there. Henry Clay stayed there. John James Audubon, and an exiled king. King Louis Philippe of France stayed in Kentucky at the Old Talbott Tavern with his crew, and it is either rumored or factual, sometimes these things are difficult to ascertain which they are, that the crew painted a mural of a garden in one of the rooms. The mural comes up later, by the way.
I feel like there could I feel like there could be like a Disney movie about that, like exiled king comes to Kentucky and has to live it the hard way.
Yeah, absolutely. They should have done that.
Sorry, that's what I was picturing. I'm sorry.
You're absolutely right. He really did like Kentucky, actually, because he donated a lot of art to a nearby cathedral in Bardstown as well. I don't know why he came there, but okay. I guess he couldn't be in France, so he had to go somewhere,
Yeah.
In 1858, a man named Alexander Walters was born in the tavern's kitchen. His mother was an enslaved person who worked at the tavern, and he grew up to be a bishop who worked with W.E.B. Du Bois, and he was one of the co-founders of the NAACP and ended up being vice president of the NAACP later in his life. Another famous one, and probably the one who is most closely associated with the tavern, is Jesse James. Okay. And to be honest with you, I've heard of Jesse James. I genuinely did not know any details about him, and I thought about taking this episode in a different direction and kind of doing a double thing where I was like part this and part that, but to be honest with you, there's just too much to talk about with the tavern, and I'm not completely sure I want to cover Jesse James in an episode, so I'm just gonna give you like a tight little snippet right now about him. But he was an outlaw.
Yeah.
That's all you kind of need to know.
Yeah.
It seems like in a lot of ways he was very brutal. He was born in Missouri in a location and in a family, and he had a lot of like sympathy with the Southern plight, putting quotes around it.
Got it.
During the Civil War, so basically like pro-Confederacy, which equals pro-slavery. He participated in at least 2 massacres, and he robbed a train while he and his crew wore Ku Klux Klan masks. And he was kind of, one thing people, like, apparently people started seeing him kind of like as Robin Hood or something, because when he did rob the train, he didn't rob the passengers, he robbed this big safe of the train. So, like, kind of the whole steal from the rich, give to the poor, but I kind of doubt he was giving to the poor. I think he was not stealing from the poor in this specific instance. On this one thing I read. I don't know the guy, you know? Anyway, he apparently came by because he had a cousin whose name was Donnie Pence, who worked at the jail, which was also close by, and who became sheriff of the town. So he would always come to Bardstown, supposedly stay at the tavern, and hang out with Donnie Pence. And this is also kind of one of the things where I'm not exactly sure what is rumor versus what is fact about this. I mean, I feel like because you named the cousin, there's some truth there.
Right.
And it makes sense. I absolutely have no idea if this guy was at the tavern. He could have been. But, okay, I'm getting a lot of King's Tavern vibes from Natchez, Mississippi, episode 11, everybody. And one of the things that came up again and again and again in the researching of King's Tavern is they kept saying the Hart brothers were here. The Hart brothers were here, which, by the way, you never want to be in a place where the Hart brothers are.
No.
Just so you know. Episode 8. And so the Hart brothers, as you know, Zoey, are these serial killer brothers, also outlaws, incredibly brutal, do not want to be around them. And everything, if you Google King's Tavern, one of the first thing that comes up says the Hart brothers were there. And lo and behold, later it comes up, there was no, like, evidence that they had ever been there, anything pointing to it. It's more like they were sometimes in the general area, and by the general area, I mostly mean Mississippi. And people just kind of like, people like to cling on to like, oh, this person visited, and they might have. Who knows?
Right.
So the murals are coming up again because, and again, this is one of the things where I don't know what's real, what's made up, but I'm just going to speak it like it's real. So, because this is as much a part of the story of the place as anything else. So Jesse James was staying at the tavern one night, and he went up to stay in the room where the murals were painted by, you know, King Louis Philippe's entourage. And the long and the short of it is that he ended up shooting the wall, and you can still see the bullets there today, I think.
Got it.
Possibly.
Is there a chance that they did renovations and then just like kind of took a piece of plywood out in the back and shot similar holes and put it back, you know?
There is an opportunity for renovation that comes up later in its history, but I'm not sure. Okay. And the reason I say I think is because I do know that there were renovations later, and I just cannot remember like what survived or what didn't survive. And I know there's certain parts that's there. I know at one point they were still needing to work on the murals because a lot of the paint got off, and so I did see somewhere that the bullets were still there, but I just didn't see a photo of the bullets.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not saying there's subterfuge by the hotel or anything. So anyway, long and short, he shot at the mural, and there are a few theories as to why. One of which is that he saw a ghost. Shoot. Goes through the ghost, hits the mural, ghost disappears. That would do it. Another theory is that he saw the butterflies that were painted in the mural starting to fly. And then he shot at the butterflies.
Okay.
And I wrote in my notes, that's some yellow wallpaper stuff.
Yeah.
Like, Charlotte Perkins Gilman short story all the way.
I was about to say that that kind of makes me think that there's something more wrong with him than there is something wrong with the mural.
I think the mural's fine.
I wasn't sure if you were trying to imply that it's like a haunted mural or something.
No. Okay, so, I mean, I don't know what people are trying to imply, but when I read, like, the ghost thing, I wasn't thinking, like, the mural was haunted. I was thinking, like, in front of the mural, and because the mural is on the wall, you shot through it.
Yeah.
Another theory, and to be honest with you, I think that this is both the most entertaining and the most likely, is that he simply made the shots as his place of basically what today we would write, somebody would write Jesse was here. It's more like bang, 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 bang. I was here. And I feel like that, I don't know Jesse James, I don't like Jesse James, but I do feel like that fits Jesse James's character.
It's kind of like Zorro.
From the paragraph I read.
It's kind of like Zorro, but like with guns. Because, you know, Zorro...
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, okay, so Zorro is what the Princess Bride Black Mask man. I get those two mixed up all the time.
Oh, Zorro.
But Zorro did the Z with his rapier.
Okay. There are two different ones, aren't there?
Yep, they are two different.
Okay, but I know what you're talking about.
But yeah, he always does the Z with his rapier, so maybe Jesse James was trying to do a J with his guns, but then guns aren't as good as they are now back then, so he just really messed it up.
I'm sure that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So the tavern has now 5 or 6 rooms. There's also an associated inn beside it called the Tavern Inn, but we're not talking about that because that was newer renovation and newer made, and I haven't heard that that's haunted. So the tavern itself does have some rooms that you can stay in because it's kind of like a bed and breakfast situation as well as being a tavern. And these rooms are named for the most famous people who visited. There's the Daniel Boone room.
Okay.
The Jesse James room. The Anton Heinrich room, I don't know who that is, and I'm not looking it up. The Lincoln room. And the General's Quarters, which is named that for 2 generals who stayed there, one of whom was a Revolutionary War general named General George Rogers Clark, and he apparently used the space as a command base during a war. It might have been the Revolutionary War. I don't know.
Got it.
I just needed to get that all out there. Yeah, okay, so those are like... those are the 5 rooms. I think there's a 6th room. There may be, may not be. I don't know if it's named after anybody in particular. It wasn't always the Old Talbott Tavern, as these things tend to not always be. That was a stupid sentence. Did you know not everything is named the Old Talbot Tavern?
It did take me a second to understand what you meant, but I figure you meant, like, it used to have a different name.
I know that is what I meant, and then I heard what I said, and then I was like, that's so stupid. Okay. But I'm ready. I'm back.
Okay.
So, the Old Talbot Tavern was first called the Heinz Hotel, and then it was called the Newman House. And by the way, there were a lot of other names that I just didn't put in there, so just sprinkle in some other names. It finally got a name that stuck in 1886, or about 1886. A man named George Talbot bought the tavern, owned it, lived there with his family, and it became the Talbot Tavern. This is part of, like, the legend of the tavern that, while based in fact, has gotten blown up over time. And so, okay, you Google it and you hear Talbot Tavern, and the fact that, like, drags behind the name George Talbot often is that within the first 3 years that he lived there, 6 of his children died. And it says, suicide warning real quick. It says one of them fell down the stairs between the first and the second floor, and it says that one of them hanged herself because of a romance that went bad. Mm-hmm. I was a little bit suspicious of, well, I was very suspicious of because of the romance that went bad thing, just because, like, that, okay, when people say that a place is haunted and it's really old, they always say that there's a situation exactly like that there.
Right.
And it just felt a little bit like, whenever there is a often repeated story that, like, trails between all of these different places, most of the time it's not true. So I did a little digging, and I didn't find anything where he did have children who died there. I didn't find anything where they would have been the age to have had a romance that went bad or anything like that. So, and it wasn't to the degree that is said there. So, okay, I'm just going to kind of go through it. Okay, in 1885, December of 1885, he and his wife did have twin daughters who died in infancy, and the source I saw that said he had it in 1886, it said he had it by 1886, which means that, like, by that point, there were documents proving he had it, but it's very possible that he could have had it in December 1885. So in that case, yes, 2 of his children could have died then. And then through the years, when they had the tavern, which I'm counting up through 1912, because that's when George died, and it doesn't mention that his wife carried it on after him, they did have 3 other children died during that time. One who was Martin in 1898, so that would be about 12 years after they first got there. One named Margaret in 1903, and one named Regina in 1904. So yes, there was a lot of like tragedy of children dying there, but it was not within those first 3 years. And I also kind of need to put this into context of, this was just during a time where there were a lot of like high child rates of death, and these people had a lot of children, and you know, many of them survived and stuff. But I just don't want us to like read into this tavern of being, this is cursed, when really this was just a sad kind of fact of the times. So yeah, I wanted to put that little asterisk and by that little legend beside there. George did some updates to the tavern while he lived there. He put in a new wing, which was made out of brick, and he updated the, okay, all you men bunk here and all you women bunk here situation. He gave everybody their own rooms. Okay. Thank you, George. So it wasn't like a hostel. Right. Which I've never stayed in a hostel. Have you ever stayed in a hostel?
I have never even left the country, and I don't think there's hostels in the United States.
There are hostels in the United States.
Really?
Yeah, so I got really close to staying one when I went to Portland a couple years ago, but I ended up rooming with people who instead mostly kind of wanted to stay in an Airbnb, and I was kind of really happy about that.
Yeah.
I've also like heard, and I cannot verify this, but like whenever I would bring up to like friends that like, oh yeah, well there's a hostel that we could stay at, but we're not going to, they were like, a hostel in America, and just something about it like saying like they didn't think it'd be like as high quality as hostels in other places. I don't know why that's the general thought behind it, but FYI. Now it was called the Talbott Tavern between 1885 and 1968. And so in 1968 and or 1969, that is when they came up with the name, the Old Talbott Tavern.
So creative.
So creative. And I also like that it takes exactly 189 years to be considered old. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, it was the new Talbott Tavern before that, I'm sure. In 1973, it was added to the National Register of Historic Places. And in 1998, March 7th, it had a big electrical fire. And this, like, I didn't send you a photo, Zoe, of this, but, like, honestly, I could have, because it was really intense, actually. It took out a lot of the roof and a lot of the second floor, and they ended up having to close down for over a year to do rebuilding and restoration, and eventually it reopened on November 8th, 1999. Now it is a bed and breakfast and restaurant and bar. There's lots of travel and food places that feature it, including the Travel Channel and the Food Network. They are very known to be a hotspot for Kentucky bourbon and bourbon enthusiasts, of which there are many and of which we will hear more later. And Zoe, as you may have guessed, it's haunted.
What? I thought we just turned into a Travel Channel episode.
I had to lay the scene. I had to set the scene. So, Zoe, if I had to ask you one thing that is going to haunt this tavern, or not this one in particular, but a tavern, and it could be considered even a phenomenon by this point, what would you say haunts the tavern?
I want to say that there's a cowboy there. Or, like, somebody sitting... No, dang it. Okay, there's
a lady in white.
Oh, I was thinking somebody sitting at the bar.
Well, I'm sure they sit at the bar. But, Zoe, there's a lady in white.
Okay.
So, she is seen floating. Mm-hmm. She's not on the ground. She's floating in the tavern. She's in a white dress. And people associate that as Mrs. Talbott, whose name was Annie. And I don't know, she didn't die at the tavern. She lived in Bardstown the rest of her life. She died in 1943, which meant she outlived her husband by 31 years. Maybe it's her. I don't know. It might also be that that's just the woman who's most associated with the place, and so they say it's her.
Yeah.
Could be. You know how I feel about people who say that, like, this ghost is this famous person?
Yeah.
I'm just like, you don't know this.
No.
You don't know this.
This could be, like, literally some random person who just got engaged at that bar, and then she died on her wedding day or something, you know? Or maybe all ghosts wear white.
Less dramatic. That could be it. What if it's just like a thing? It'd be like, we're all ladies in white, really.
Yes.
Down to it. Okay, so I wasn't able to find a whole bunch out about the cemetery, which I desperately wanted to, Zoe. One of these days, I'm going to rock your socks with the cemetery episode.
Okay.
I have a couple planned.
My socks are prepared.
Oh. They're gonna they're gonna meet their maker, and that maker's me. So I couldn't find a whole bunch about the cemetery, but I did, like, catch one little tidbit about it. Supposedly, there's a witch who was hanged back in ye olden times, and she comes back to the cemetery as a cat.
Meow. Sorry.
Yeah. So what I'm doing right now, I'm, like, giving you the general spooky gist of the whole thing before we get into specific stories. So people will see orbs.
Orbs.
Okay. Moving.
Mm-hmm.
People will see sudden light flashes. Doors will open and shut on their own. You'll be able to hear this. You will hear knocking on doors. And then there were some things that, like, all came in a row. One of the things I was researching that were, like, all very King's Tavern-y. Like, major similar vibes. And so I just got to get you those in a quick succession. So it was cutlery moving. All right?
Okay.
Things like things moving from one location and then reappearing in another location. So the example I was given, I think, or did I come up with this on my own? I think I was given it, was keys on the front desk show up hours later in the hall floor. Furniture jumping. People will hear music without a known source. A piano will be playing. No one is there to play it. Your typicals, but the King's Tavern-y things was when, like, the furniture was jumping and stuff like that, because, like, in King's Tavern, I think the tables rattled, and that just screams, like, poltergeist or something not good there. And, Zoe, most creepily, shadow figures.
Yes! Okay.
I'm also gonna rock your socks off with a shadow figures episode one day, but just completely shadow figures, but... And I thought about making this a two-parter, but I was like, there's no time. There's too much here. I can't do it. But, okay, people will see shadow figures in the hallway especially, and they'll often see them, like, in these kind of dark corners where, like, the shadow will leave the corner, and then when it kind of gets too much into the light, it disappears. Mm-hmm. Spooky, right? So this brings me to the link I sent you, Zoe. So what I need you to do is open up the link, and where did I write the time code for you? So we just watched a video that I found on YouTube. In it, I asked Zoe to mute it because the manager is explaining her interpretation over the video while it's playing, which is how I experienced it. But I wanted Zoe to kind of be able to see it without the explanation. This is the only version of the video I could find. It's not the original version. The original version was by LCGH, which I believe stands for the Lake Cumberland Ghost Hunters. Okay. So, Zoe, you were saying just now that, like, you didn't know what you were supposed to be looking at. It wasn't really clear to you. Right,
yeah. It's a mostly gray screen, and, like, in the top middle-ish, there's, like, a white box that looks like it's a stairwell, like at an apartment complex, like really far away, and it has like lights on the breezeway. You know where I'm talking about, like even in my apartment complex has it. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of looks like somebody came out a door and started going down the stairs slowly.
Okay, so two things to clarify. And one thing, again, I watched it with the manager's explanation or interpretation over it, so like that could totally be coloring it. But it came so this was at night. Mm-hmm. The figure is like all in black, everybody. Right. And it's like not necessarily the most solid looking thing. But the figure came out of a hall where basically that was kind of the lead to the fire escape. And the black part it came into, which was like just a dark hallway that we kind of saw it disappear into once it was out of the light of the door. That was not a stairwell, that was a solid hallway. So that's kind of like one of the creepy things about it was how low down they were. So the manager was looking at it, and she was saying that this was just her reading of the situation, is that it looked like this figure was army crawling, which is like when you were like on your forearms in the front, and that she couldn't see the back legs of it.
Let me watch that again. So I'm having a hard time understanding where the camera is placed, I guess.
So think about the camera maybe being like on the opposite end of the hall.
On the ceiling?
Like, yeah, looking down at it.
And that light is from a room door being open.
It's from the hall door, hallway arch or something. And that figure is not going down the stairs.
It's just going into the dark part of the hallway.
It's just going into the dark part of the hallway.
Yeah, I guess I can see it. I don't know. Yeah, okay, I guess I can see it.
Okay, so I gotta, like, tell you, that is the thing that I couldn't see last night. That freaked me out.
Oh.
I had to, like, okay, I know, like, you're, like, chill with it or whatever, but that just freaked me the heck out because the proportions of it, they don't look like, it doesn't look like a human walking down the hallway. And nothing is walking, it looks like it's crawling. Just the whole image of it really, really freaked me out. Mm-hmm. You seem to be chill, so that's great. It's scary, Zoe.
I am rewatching it now again. It feels like, is this footage in slow-mo or is this real time? Okay. I don't know if they said something about it.
No.
Because it feels like it's in slow-mo.
There's an asterisk that I'm putting by this one. Do you know the show Fact or Faked Paranormal Files? That's what debunked your beloved lizard man, or at least debunked something about your beloved lizard man.
Right.
So this show debunked something that this group did, a different video at the tavern that had to do with a cat, basically saying if you shine like a flashlight in a certain way, it could kind of look like what they were claiming was a cat. And this video could have easily been somebody like crawling on, like an actual person crawling on the floor, either because they happened to be super drunk and they were gonna go to their room, it is a tavern, or because like perhaps it was staged. Now the manager does say that this person is going from the end of the hall, kind of like right out of room 4, which is, I know that rooms 4 and 5 are like 2 of the spookiest rooms there, or the most haunted, which one of them is the Daniel Boone room and one of them is the Anton Heinrich room, and I don't know which is which, but there's going to be a lot more coming up about the Daniel Boone room in particular. And so she was saying that in her view, and kind of knowing like the layout of it, and perhaps she was seeing a version of it that had a bit more clarity than we were, since this is not the original copy, because I was not able to find that. She says it looks like the figure, once he does kind of get into the dark part of the hallway, is going to what is now a gift shop stock closet, but used to be where the elevator was. And so she thinks that it looks to her like he's slipping down the elevator shaft. And, you know, I was not able to see what happened once he kind of disappeared into the dark, so I cannot say that. But, like, honestly, I do see exactly where she's talking about, like, crawling on the floor without legs. Like, that, I'm like, oh, yep, I think that's it. I mean, and listen, could be easily faked. It could easily be somebody who was just crawling upstairs. But it is creepy to watch. And I was creeped as heck last night. And I was creeped out this morning. And one day I'm going to cover shadow figures, and I'm going to be really creeped out.
Okay.
Just so we all know this. And like it could, like I said, it could be faked, but like it's almost one of those situations where I'm like, if it is faked, you know, it worked, so like I don't even care.
So if we are going with like the manager's interpretation of it, like I 100% agree that it would have to be somebody without legs. Like, yeah, it kind of reminds me of like in the zombie movies when there's like a zombie without legs and he's still trying to get at you, you know?
Oh, I don't watch that many zombie movies, but I can like, I think I can see what you mean. Yeah. So now I'm going to get into some more of the ghostish stories now that we've had our fun with the shadow figure. So a couple was staying at the tavern one night, and they woke up to the lady in white floating over them and looking at them.
Okay, when you say floating over them, do you mean like they're in bed here and the ghost was here? Or do you mean like
nobody
here?
Ever Okay, well, okay. Zoe, no, the listeners can't see your hands, but nobody ever specifies that.
Is she parallel with them or perpendicular?
Nobody ever specifies that, and I'm literally always just so curious. I think the creepiest possible thing is if she's like literally parallel over their bodies.
No, 100%.
But I don't know.
Okay.
And after they saw her looking at them, she did like go out the window, still floating. So like, okay. The manager, and I mean, there's been like some managers, so I'm not like, when I say the manager, I'm not saying like one static character, the manager. I don't always know which time they're referring to whom, but the dining room is called the Audubon dining room because, you know, John James Audubon was there at some point. The manager was kind of getting things ready for dinner, and this happened on 3 separate occasions. So she's getting things ready there. a guest walks in. She's not really like looking up for it just yet because she's getting things ready, but she can kind of see it out of the corner of her eye, and it's a lady in an older style dress, a long dress that she says could have been from like the 1800s, and she has long brown hair. And the manager, once she's like kind of done doing what she was doing, she looks up, and that person is no longer there, and she kind of looks around for it, and she's not showing up, and there's like there's not that many people who stay there because, like, again, it's like 5 or 6 rooms, so you would kind of know who's staying there at any given time. And it never seems to be any of those people, necessarily. Though it could be, like, you know, I mean, you can eat there and not stay there, so it could be just, like, another guest. But that's a weird way to dress, so I'm still leaning toward Lady in White. Though it doesn't say anything about her floating.
True.
So,
hey, maybe during the day, she's just a little bit more human-like, and then at night, that's when she becomes, like, ghostly.
Yes, I like that, Zoe. I like that. The general quarters room. There's quite a bit that goes bump in the night there. So I found a blog post article on a website called Gothic Horror Stories, and this article is called America's Haunted Inns, Bardstown, Kentucky's Chilling Old Talbott Tavern Lives Up to Its Reputation by Todd Atterbury. And in it he talks about, you know, he's spending the night there, and he's spending the night there. I got the sense specifically just to, like, see the ghost levels going on there. I don't know. He wasn't, like, ghost hunting. But anyway, he spent the night in the general quarters, and he said, like, when he first visited the room, when he first got there, he noticed it was pretty cold, and the other rooms weren't necessarily cold. He does give the caveat, and I think we really do have to pay attention to this caveat, that he had an infection from a bug bite. So, like, your body's going through things when that happens. But he does say that the Lincoln room in particular was, like, not cold. So it was, like, it only seemed to be happening to him in the general quarters room.
Okay.
He, you know, he did the whole thing. He stayed there, he ate there, he drank there. He's getting to know the other people who were living there, which I think there were, like, 6 people staying there total that night. I can't quite remember. But he woke up in the general's quarters at 3:35 a.m. A creepy time to wake up.
Very.
And he was so cold. Like, the reason he woke up is because he was freezing. And, like, he said, full disclosure, he was feverish. It was not good. Could have been the infection. Totally, 100%. The furnace had shut off, but when he, like, banged it and stuff, it came back on. And he could tell, like, warm air was coming out, but the room was still really, really cold. And, like, it wasn't helping.
And did he say what time of the year he went? Like,
he might have, I might not have written it down. I can't remember.
Because that's very different if it happens in December versus August.
Yeah, if it was in December, I'd be like, okay, par for the course. Like, yeah. I've been cold. Like I said, there are about 6 people staying there, and the staff does not work there overnight. Okay. So, like, they kind of like, they're like, peace, here's the keys. And so he was trying to go back to sleep. And again, it's like 3:35, 4 a.m. by this point. And everybody seems to be walking by his room and opening and shutting the doors right by him and talking out there. And he's like, oh my God, like, let me sleep. And then he's like, wait 1 second, only like 5 or 6 other people are here, and absolutely nobody is in the room that they're opening and shutting the door of. Because he had, you know, heard that the Jesse James room was in particular very haunted. So he had, like, he knew that nobody was staying there that night, and, like, he had even, like, tested the door just to, like, make sure that it was locked, and it was. So, like, there's no reason it should be opening and shutting. So he said there are 2 beds in the general's quarters, and so he switched from one bed to the other bed, and it was warmer, so he did get to sleep. But it was just kind of a weird night, and it could have been explained by the whole infection thing, but there were some weird things happening about 3 a.m. And the weird things, those are weird things that people often say happen at that place. So, you know. Another instance, in the general's quarters room, somebody was sleeping when they felt like a child had just kind of crawled into bed with them and was sleeping at their back and kind of holding them like they were spooning. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's the only, like, details I have on that one, but that sounds really creepy.
Yeah.
Another story, the bookkeeper and the cook were, I think, closing up, and they were the only ones there. The bookkeeper might have been going to the safe, I don't know, but they saw someone walking on the second story near them. They were both on the stairs, and this person was in a long, like, really old-style coat. So they were like, oh, this person should not be here. This guest should not be here. So they were, like, kind of, like, trying to, like, get a hold of this person, and the person kept walking away, so they kind of like followed him through the tavern, and that person ended up going to the fire escape, which we recently heard about. And when they got to the fire escape, the man turned to them, laughed really hard, and then vanished.
Oh, you know what?
And
that would be a pretty funny prank if you were a ghost, like making someone follow you all around, getting tired and being like, sir, excuse me, sir. And then just be like, I was never here, and then just peace out. That would be kind of fun.
Well, they think they know who it was, Zoe.
Was it Jesse James?
The manager... I hate you. The manager was watching TV 3 weeks later, and it was some show about outlaws, and they threw up a photo of Jesse James, and she was like, oh my god, that was the guy who turned around and laughed.
Oh my god.
And disappeared, which I feel like is the highlight of the story, not laughing. Well, no, I mean, okay. The laughing is like the humorous highlight of the story.
Right, yeah.
The vanishing is the, oh shit.
That's a ghost.
That's a ghost.
That's a ghost.
It's a ghost. That should be our tagline.
That's a ghost.
That's a ghost. 2 other employees have apparently had experience with this fella. I did not hear about them. So, I wish, but I didn't.
Okay.
C'est la vie, c'est la vie. One guy described to the manager what I'm reading as to be an experience of sleep paralysis, where he woke up seeing, like, red, white, and yellow orbs moving around the room, and he said it couldn't get up because it felt like there was an electric current inside him. It wasn't, like, painful, but he felt like there was an electric current. And I'm like, you can't get up, you're seeing funny things, you have sleep paralysis, my friend.
Yeah.
And you and I have different interpretations of sleep paralysis.
No. No, we have the same scientific. It's just sometimes I think it can be spooky. Or it's scientific and you're being held in that liminal space. And if there happens to be a ghost, it's easier to see them than it would be if you were asleep or awake.
Okay, so I think I was under the impression that you always thought sleep paralysis was like...
a ghosty thing?
A ghosty thing.
No. I understand sleep paralysis 100% is a sciencey thing, but I do believe that it allows you to see spooky things.
Okay. One person... other guests stayed there, and their TV turned on and off repeatedly, which, could be bad wiring. And their heater would stay up really high, even though they would turn it down. And they weren't able to sleep because the room was so hot. And actually, after I read that whole thing, I was thinking, like, demon, and now I'm thinking, no, that's wiring. Just being real over here. I think that room had some electrical issues.
You know, you were like, I was thinking demon, and I was like, oh, do you think it's a poltergeist? Like, I was like, what other ghost do you think it is? And then you're like, wiring. And I was like, oh.
Well, I'm just saying, I was thinking like that, but like, that's the only thing I heard of that, like, got hot, and it was, like, at the same time that your TV was turning on and off repeatedly. I saw, like, a quote in one of the articles I did for my Something Spooky last time, which is, like, why we really like ghosts, and, like, why we really like ghost stories, and so it was kind of talking about it from the paranormal ghost hunters angle, and one person said, like, 20% of the things we investigate might be ghosts, but about 80% are, like, bad wiring. So it's just,
yeah.
Check, get an electrician, folks. If you think your house is haunted, step 1, get an electrician. One server who worked there heard a voice yell her name, which is normal, except she was closing up by herself and nobody was there. So that's not normal. Fun fact, I used to hear people, like, yelling my name all the time.
Same.
Okay, I'm glad I'm not the only one. Thank you.
I think it's trauma from your parents yelling at you. I'm kidding. I'm 100% kidding. And when I say you, I meant the general you. But...
the general you.
The general you.
Now I want to briefly talk about the most adorable ghost hunting video I've ever seen, and I texted you about this.
Yes,
when
you did.
I saw it. So you can find them on YouTube. I don't think they're very active, but you can find them on YouTube at Back 40 Films, but they're called the Happy Hour guys, and they're not ghost hunters. There are 2 guys that go around to different bars and breweries and, just tell you about them. And Zoe, I feel like you and I, without maybe naming it, is like being aggressive. Have talked a lot about the general aggression that is in ghost hunting videos. Like,
oh,
how do I do a Zach Baggins impression? Are you here? Tell me if you're here.
Push me down the stairs.
Push me down the stairs. And I'm so tired of that, and I don't get like why they're all like that. And I'm even the ones I like, they're like that. What happens to you? But these guys, they just happened to be at a ghosty place. I did not get a whole bunch of information out of them, only that it was through them that I learned that rooms 4 and 5 are reportedly the most haunted. One of them was staying in the Daniel Boone room, and it was just so delightful. They were like, listen, the pillow is on the chair, and now it's not on the chair. Isn't that just the creepiest thing? And it was amazing.
That's funny.
So, everybody, I don't know. Just watch that video. It was delightful, and also just like an amazing change of pace. They really should have like a ghost hunting show. There should just be a ghost hunting show where like you're just terrified. Like, the people who are hosting it are like, they don't want to be there. They're so terrified to be there.
It would be called Ghost Hunted.
Yeah, ghost hunting sounds like you're the predator. These guys are the prey.
Yeah.
For sure. Not these guys in particular, but like, if you are the ones being scared while ghost hunting, that show would be Ghost Hunted, because it's the prey. You're genius. Yeah. A former manager was... who I think at this point was a current manager. That was a stupid way to phrase it. She was in room 5, and she was sitting by the window.
Was she in 4 or 5?
I need to rewind. A former manager was in room 5, sitting by the window, when it felt like something actually pulled her body.
Ooh.
And she was also hit by a pillow that, like, flew out of a chair on its own.
Okay.
She no longer goes to room 5.
Oh.
So that's that story. A couple was staying in the Daniel Boone room, and remember, this is where the pillow came out of the chair, but not, like, the same as that lady? Or, I don't know, Daniel Boone room could have been room 5. Anyway, this was definitely the Daniel Boone room, where there's already been some creepy things happening, and they had a really odd experience. It was 7:30 in the morning, and they were both sleeping, when somebody shook the husband's shoulder awake, and they said, "Are you coming downstairs for breakfast?" And he was like, "No." And then he, like, turned to his wife, and then, like, he looked back to the guy, or whoever shook his shoulder, and they were gone. And so he and his wife got up really quickly. And they went downstairs where the manager was, and they were like, "Hey, do you typically send people into the room to, like, wake us up and ask if we're going down to breakfast?" And she said, "No, we don't do that, actually. And also, it's just me and the cook here right now." So, like, that wasn't us.
Awesome.
So that's creepy. Awesome, but creepy. A person who worked maintenance for the tavern was there by himself one Sunday morning. There's lots of stories of people who were, like, at the tavern by themselves, but, like, isn't this a place where people stay the night?
I did wonder that. I did wonder that. Maybe it's, like, where the people stay is kind of, like, separate from where the people work, you know? And so maybe it's just, like, well, they were in this section of the house and we were in this section.
You know, I like that. Well, actually, if you do look at it, the tavern, it's like there's this kind of it's like there's, like, almost, like, 2 buildings that were, like, built to merge together. So it's, like, kind of think of, like, a square building that kind of, like, tapers up at the top, and then, like, kind of like a first story thing that's kind of flatter, and then a second building that was built later but meant to look kind of identical, where it goes straight up and then tapers at the top. So perhaps that's kind of the different sections they're talking about. But a person was doing maintenance there. He was installing a fan in one of the bedrooms, and he had the bedroom door shut while he was working on it. But then he heard kids running, like, down the stairs and stuff, and, like, talking and playing and stuff. So he was like, that shouldn't be happening. I'm here alone. So he opened the door. Nobody was there. Goes back to the fan. And this happens 2 more times, where he hears them, he opens the door, nothing's there. So finally, the 4th time he hears them, he opens the door and leaves it open. And nobody appears after that. There's no sound going on after that.
I know if I was Ghost Child, I would ding-dong ditch the management. Or the maintenance.
One of the workers answered the phone one time to hear an old man tell her, quote, "Look up through the stairs." So where the phone was, like the station for the phone, it was beneath the stairwell on the first floor. She didn't look up, actually, but she was kind of confused. And then a woman's voice came on asking to speak to the owner. And she was like, yeah, I can transfer you to the owner. So she was about to put them on hold to transfer. And then she heard the man's voice again. And he again said, look up through the stairs. She had like her finger on the hold button, was about to press it, but then she realized the phone was not registering that she was on a call at all, or that there had been a call.
No, thank you.
No, thank you. I know, right?
Please tell me she didn't look up and see like someone staring at her.
No, okay. She did not look up, but there's a chance, and I saw a video where the manager was recounting the story, and she wasn't the one who answered it, but she was recounting it from somebody else, and she was seeming to say that perhaps, like, it could be some kind of connection to the fire that had happened years ago, because the fire had, you know, taken out a lot of the second story and a lot of the first story, and that maybe potentially you could look up through the stairs at that point with the fire, so possibly, like, hearkening back to that, but it was just a weird situation, for sure. So I'm going to round out this episode by reading a couple of first-hand experiences before we get to our ultimate question, which is this haunted on a scale from 1 to 10. So Zoe, I want you to be thinking about that. So our first one is from Reddit is from Reddit user u/uncafe_olaut. I know I pronounced that really wrong. And this has been edited for length and clarity. Ahem. Back in February, we went on the Kentucky Bourbon Tour for my friend's birthday. My friend, whom is a sensitive, which means attracts spirits, can read auras, etc., wanted to eat dinner at the very historic and potentially haunted Old Talbott Tavern. We sat down to eat at this historic restaurant, not expecting much activity, although people say it is a common occurrence. Someone at our table had been making jokes about the late Jesse James, who was said to haunt the place. After joking around a bit, he got up to use the restroom. Meanwhile, we heard a loud crash against the wall. Everyone at our table looked over, although the people at the end already had their eyes fixed on the wall. A man was standing frozen with his hand on his chair. He was about to sit down when he saw a glass fly off our table and hit the wall. As he stood there frozen, he said, "I must be psychic or something, because I watched that glass fly across the room." Jokingly, we discussed how condensation made the glass slide off. However, 3 people said the glass didn't slide, it flew off the table. The glass would have needed to slide from one end of the table to the other while picking up enough momentum to hit a wall 5 feet away. When our friend returned, we let him know what happened. He instantly became paranoid and guilty, despite the fact he wasn't there when it happened. The staff laughed it off and didn't speak of it as if it was no surprise to them. Apparently, glasses flying around the room are a common occurrence. The table next to us, the man stood there frozen, kept watching the spot, his eyes glued in terror. His daughter kept looking at the wall and us. We were glad when they finally left because it really creeped us out. When we got back to her apartment, the guy whose glass flew off the table said he wasn't feeling that good. He hadn't looked that great since he first learned about what happened. He said he was just going to go home and go to bed, but before he could leave, she decided to smudge every one of us in the room. He felt fine the next day. The sensitive's boyfriend decided to let her know that he had been seeing a woman standing at the foot of their bed recently, but that's a whole different bag of worms. So it veered off. I had to include the end because it veered off into a entirely different direction that I desperately want to know more about. And at first, I had read, oh, he's been seeing a woman. Oh, she's been standing at the end of the bed. And that wasn't even related to the story, but I had to let you know.
Okay.
Anyway, creepy.
Yeah, creepy.
It took me a while. I didn't realize until this read-through, as I was reading it out loud, that, oh, wait, the man and the daughter were staring at the table in fear because they thought, there was a ghost at that table or something. Mm-hmm. But I was like, why are they just being so creepy staring at, the protagonists of this story?
I thought you were about to tell me, and then they disappeared or something like that.
No, that didn't happen. So anyway, a glass flying.
Yeah.
Apparently that happens. This is a comment by Hannah on the Gothic Horror Stories blog post that I had mentioned above, where the guy is in the general's quarters. She talks about her experience staying in the general's quarters. My partner Heather and I stayed at the Talbott Tavern in the same room as you at first. We were there in the middle of winter on a weeknight. The manager handed Heather the keys to the front door and to our room, and I went upstairs as they were going to bring the luggage up. I was waiting there alone when I heard a door slam really hard, but couldn't tell where the noise came from. I then heard another. They got upstairs with the luggage, and I asked the manager, "Are you sure there's no one else here? Because I heard doors slamming shut." To which she replied, "Oh my gosh, I hate to leave you girls here on your own, but I have to go to this wedding rehearsal, but you ladies are the only ones here." We settled into the general's quarters, and I decided to take a shower. I had my eyes closed for a bit while I was washing my hair, and when I opened them, there was a little girl staring at me through the shower curtain.
No.
I called out to my partner, "Heather, who is this little girl that you let in there?" I feel like that would not be my first
I would
thing.
scream.
I know. She responded, "What are you talking about?" I looked back toward the girl and she was gone. I was really freaked out, so we left and went to a bar where I had a couple shots of bourbon. That is a good reaction. When we got back to our room, it was so incredibly cold that we were both shivering, even though the bed, furniture, etc. were all quite warm. But no matter what we did, we couldn't get warm at all. It felt like we were not welcome there, and we heard a lot of odd sounds coming from the sealed-off room next door, where the fire was. I don't know exactly what that means. Maybe where the fire had happened?
Maybe it started there?
Maybe. Yeah, okay, so continuing. Heather then went downstairs and got a key to another room in the newer section of the inn, and we basically ran over there, leaving our suitcases in the general's quarters. As soon as we got into bed, the doorknob to our room shook like someone was trying to get in. There were heavy footsteps that were constant through the night, doors slamming shut, and I heard what could only be described as a group of men loudly laughing and carrying on, like they were having a card game. We got up to investigate, thinking there was for sure someone else in the inn with us, but there was no one around. The doors kept slamming all night long, voices, and around 4 a.m. I heard a loud bell of some kind ringing over and over and over. I finally fell asleep around 5 a.m., only to have terrifying dreams of men being hanged. Yep, that was a night I won't soon forget.
No,
and that's
thank
the
you.
end of her story. I do not want that experience. That sounds like the worst hotel experience ever.
No, I'm still gonna stay there one day if I ever get the chance. But
I totally want to go. Yeah, I totally want to go, but that one was really creepy. And, like, there's so many twists and turns. And, like, okay, if this person is being honest, which I don't know, I found it uncommon on the internet, that is so terrifying. Mm-hmm. And there's, like, the elements of, like, the men playing the card game, for some reason, like, that sticks out to me as, like, no, you wouldn't lie about that.
I feel like, so, to me, it sounded like the narrator was a woman as well, right?
Yeah, it was Hannah.
Hannah, okay. So, yeah. I can't help but think this was, like, a hate crime by old ghosts, you know? Like, the generals didn't want lesbians staying in his room, so he was hate criming them.
But when they left the newer section, they was still going through it.
But it was outside and not in the room.
That is true. They were trying to get in the room.
Yes.
There's something just about the idea of a doorknob, like, rattling, mm-hmm. that is, like, the most visceral mm-hmm. fear. Because, I mean, that is, like, exactly it. Like, I feel like a lot of maybe the ghost... I think a lot of the fear of ghost, at least for me, is the idea that, like, somebody is here and I don't necessarily know if they are here, and that just the uncertainty is really, really freaky to me. And I think a lot of it has to do with, like, your feelings of being secure in your space. And so, I mean, if somebody is literally, like, rattling the doorknob, like, you know there is an imminent threat to your space. And I mean, also, it could be, like, I feel like we hear that and, like, oh no, it's a ghost, it's terrifying. But honestly, I mean, the other option is that it's a person, and that should be even more terrifying to you because...
Right, yeah.
Imminent danger.
Very, yeah. Like, I guess, like, I know they can't because they're in a terrifying situation, but I would have, like, double-checked the front door to make sure that whoever left for that bride thing or wedding thing made sure to lock the door, like, oh, no. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Zoe.
Yes.
How haunted is it on a scale from 1 to 10?
I would put it at, like, 8.5.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 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 I'm a 7.9.
Okay.
I am really, and, like, that's really high for me.
Why
That's
didn't
really
you
high
just
for me.
go with 8 then?
That felt really high to say 8. I like wanted to do it, and then I was like, every time I was like writing it down, I felt like I was lying. So I was like, I can do a 7.9. But okay, so like I'm so glad you thought it was an 8.5. Okay, good. I thought I lost you there with a little bit with the shadow figure, but I'm glad you're back.
No. So the shadow figure, I think if it was a better quality and maybe a little bit more lit or something like that, and I knew exactly what I was looking at, I think I would have been creeped out. But like as it was, like it was just a bunch of blurry shapes, and some of the shapes were moving.
I gotcha. I should have let you listen to it with the manager's thing over it.
Gosh,
But I didn't want
Robin,
to.
I'm kidding.
Well, I didn't want to like cloud your judgment.
No, I think even with the manager's explanation, I would have been like, "What?" So
Okay, gotcha.
it's fine.
All right. Well, that is my episode. Thanks for sticking around with me, Zoe. Guys, if you liked today's episode, please rate, subscribe, review, tell a friendo, subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/hauntedhospitality. For $3 a month, you get a new story from us.
Yes, and
New episode from us.
Yeah, a new episode every month on the 13th because we're spooky. And if you want to see Robin's sources for this episode, you can head over to hauntedhospitality.wordpress.com. Also, if you have your own spooky story, true crime, or supernatural, maybe you've stayed at this hotel and had an experience, please write to us at hauntedhospitalitypodcast@gmail.com or slide into our DMs.
You can also find us on the interwebs on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram at Haunted Hospitality, and you can find us on Twitter at Haunted Hosts. We hope to see you there.
Stay spooky.